me open up my Diet Coke here. And I got Bub here keeping me company. All right. The cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. And the child saw a cat. I have not seen Ringo. And the dog saw a cat. And the fox saw a cat. Yes, they all saw the cat. Yes, they are big boys, Patricia Ann. The cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. And the fish saw a cat. Just to let you know, off camera here, we got C-Dot, who was coming over to a sleeping nugget and swatting him. You know, now he was licking him. It was very nice. And the mouse saw a cat. And the bee saw a cat. Yes, they all saw the cat. I love the pictures that are in the point of view of the animals that are viewing the cat. The cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. And the bird saw a cat. And the fleas saw a cat. Who's growling? Oh, no. Oh, C-Dot is and it's not threatening, jumped up here. So we got two oranges up here with me. We got C-Dot and we got Bub. Bub, you were like a nice, relaxed kitty with a giant head. Bub, you got a giant head, and I should know. And the snake saw a cat. And the skunk saw a cat. And just to let you know, C-Dot is now up here on my leg. Do you see C-Dot? And the camera saw a cat. And the worm saw a cat. And the bat saw a cat. Yes, they all saw the cat. Yes, they all saw a cat. Yeah. Look at it. I don't know. No, I don't think you can see him, but he is right there on my lap. A child and a dog and a fox and a fish and a mouse and a bee and a bird and a flea and a snake and a skunk and a worm and a bat. The cat knew them all, and they all knew the cat. Woo! He was wriggling around and he lost his balance, but he will never tell you that he lost his balance. And the cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws. Then it came to the water. Is that the queen out? No, I didn't even notice a Corley is out. And imagine what it saw. And that's really the end of that book. So this is called They All Saw a Cat. So, Canby is here. And Bob is starting to sleep. Yes, Corley has joined Storytime. So this is actually, my wife loved this book. And I've read it here before. But we're going to get some repeats because I've kind of gone through just about all of my books. But that's okay. I can always read them again. And I think at some point I might advertise beforehand certain books. You know. So this is called Chester. All right. And it says by Melanie Watt, and then Melanie Watt is crossed out, and then it says Chester in red because Chester's got the red marker. So this is a fun book. Dear readers, I apologize for Chester's behavior in my mouse story. Sorry for the inconvenience. Signed, Melody Watt. Now, right underneath in red, it says blah, blah, blah. All right. And on the book, it says, hi, I'm Melody Watt. And I'm trying to write and illustrate the story about a mouse. But Chester just won't stop interfering. Then in red, it says, thank goodness. Now it's a great book about me. See what I mean? Chester keeps doodling on and rewriting my story with his annoying red marker. How am I supposed to deal with this cat upstaging me at every turn? I need to think of a way to put an end to this before he completely takes over. Then in red it says, good luck, Einstein. As you can tell, Chester, aka the rude and self-centered furball, always has to have the last word. And in red it says, not true. Then she says, you see? And then in red it says, see what? And then, what did I tell you? And then the last thing of red says, whatever. All right, so here comes the story. First, there's for Marcos, Eva, Belina, and Leia. But it's crossed out in red. And then in red it says, for Chester, because I couldn't have made this book without him. He's the smartest, most handsome cat in the world. I wish I could be like him someday. And then it says Chester, written and distributed by Melody Watt. And then in red letters it says, not. Once upon a time, there was a mouse. He lived in a house in the country. And then there's in red. Then Mouse packed his bags and went on a trip very, very far away. We never saw him again. And we got a picture of the mouse, but then he's all in red with the circle. And it says, hasta la vista, Mousy, in red. In red, it says, so Chester moved in and made a few changes to his new place. And then if you look, it's all written in red. Chester's chair, he, a little ball of yarn, my curtains, he drew sunshine and clouds. He crossed out the cheese and put a fish there. And he kind of drew himself in all the pictures. Chester's home sweet home, it says. But Mouse returned home. Oh, yes, did I mention he brought back a really big souvenir with teeth? And look at Chester's reaction to the souvenir with teeth. Oh, here's the souvenir with teeth. Back to the story. Once upon a time, there was a mouse. He lived in Chester. Move out of the way. And then in red says he lived in the country with his vegetarian dog who only ate carrots. Then Melody begged Chester to write a better story, and it goes something like this. Anybody have a cat named that's like Chester? Once upon a time, there was me. Chester stands for charming, handsome, envy of Mouse, smart, talented, envy of Melody, really handsome. Chester lived in Chesterville, where mice weren't allowed. It was a beautiful day. Until it started to rain. And Chester is getting all wet. And all of his doodlings are getting all wet. Now, as I was saying, once upon a time there was a mouse. He lived in a house in the country. And then it read, and he lived happily ever after. It's written in the red in the bottom. The end. It's in red. All right. I think Chester is going to get his. Chester, this is where I draw the line. Nope, I'm drawing the line. Do not cross this line. Keep out Chester's side. There we go. Chester, that's enough. Hand over the marker this instant. In red it says, Chester's busy. And then he's got Chester with the little sleepy marks on it. And then he draws Melody. Hi, I am Melody Watt, and I am very angry. And then, hi, I am boring and I am jealous of Chester, the little mouse at the bottom. Chester, I'm warning you. Hand over the marker and apologize. Before I count to three. 1, 2, 3. And then Chester writes in red. And 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. La, 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 la. All right, Chester. You want your own story? You want to be the star of the book? Well, get ready. Here it is. Chester writes, finally. Once upon a time, there was a cat named Chester. He lived in a house in the country. And it's starting out normally. Chester was a very handsome cat, especially when he wore a pink, you wouldn't, tutu. Now it's personal. And now the end of the book uh, basically has the author. And look what Chester did to her face. Melody Watt lives in Montreal, Quebec. She is boring, the author and illustrator of a number of children's books, including the Scaredy Squirrel series. Scaredy who? Chester's Back, Chester's Masterpiece, Have I Got a Book for You, Augustine, Leon the Chameleon, and the Learning with Animals collection. This biography is putting me to sleep. Chester has been harassing Melody to feature him in his very own picture book since 1999. And then Chester writes, You're welcome, Gene. Forget what's her name. Chester is the real author and illustrator of Chester, critically acclaimed by Chester himself. It's the best book of the universe. More praise for Chester. Triumphant debut. Mouse. Chester is a genius. His art reminds me of Michelangelo, but with more emotional depth. Melody Watt. So that's the story of Chester. And as you can see, he's got a little thing on his back that says Mice Rule. Now, like I said, this is one of my wife's favorite books. She loved, and the kids loved that book. Okay, we are going to get into it. And I haven't really read a lot of long books. And I don't know how much more I'm going to go through it. But I think everybody knows this book. It is a classic. All right. So I now present to you Charlotte's Web. Chapter 1, Before Breakfast. Where's Papa going with that axe? Said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. Out to the hog house, replied Miss Arable. Some pigs were born last night. I don't see why he needs an axe, continued Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it. Do away with it, shrieked Fern. You mean kill it? Just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arabelle put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern, she said. Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway. Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arabelle stopped walking. Fern, he said gently, you will have to learn to control yourself. Hi, Susie. Control myself, yelled Fern. This is a matter of life and death, and you could talk about controlling yourself? Tears ran down her cheeks as she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Fern, said Mr. Arable, I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along. But it's unfair, cried Fern. The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been very small at birth, would you have killed me? Mr. Arabelle smiled. Certainly not, he said, looking down at his daughter with love. But this is different. A little girl is one thing. A little runty pig is another. I see no difference, replied Fern, still hanging on to the axe. This is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of. A queer look came over John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. All right, he said, you go back to the house and I will bring the runt when I come in. I will let you start it on a bottle like a baby. Then you'll see what trouble a pig can be. When Mr. Arabelle returned to the house half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. The kitchen table was set for breakfast, and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. Put her on her chair. Put it on her chair, said Mrs. Arabelle. Mr. Arabelle set the carton down at Fern's place. Just to show you the picture of Fern and Mr. Arabelle with the axe. Then he walked to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on the roller towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. As she approached her chair, the carton wobbled and there was a scratching noises. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid of the carton. There, inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through its ears, turning them pink. He's yours, said Mr. Arabelle, saved from an untimely death. And may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness. Fern couldn't take her eyes off the tiny pig. Oh, she whispered, oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect. She closed the carton carefully. First she kissed her father, and then she kissed her mother. Then she opened the lid again, lifted the pig out, and held it against her cheek. At this moment, her brother Avery came into the room. Avery was 10. He was heavily armed, an air rifle in one hand, a wooden dagger in the other. What's this? He demanded. What's Fern got? She's got a guest for breakfast, said Mrs. Arabelle. Wash your hands and face, Avery. Let's see it, said Avery, setting his gun down. You call that miserable thing a pig? That's a fine specimen of a pig. It's no bigger than a white rat. Wash up and eat your breakfast, Avery, said his mother. The school bus will be along in half an hour. Can I have a pig too, Pop? Asked Avery. No, I only distributed pigs to early risers, said Mr. Arabelle. Fern was up at daylight trying to rid the world of injustice. As a result, she now has a pig. A small one, to be sure, but nevertheless a pig. It just shows what can happen if a person gets out of bed promptly. Let's eat. But Fern couldn't eat until her pig had had a drink of milk. Mrs. Arabelle found the baby's nursing bottle and a rubber nipple. She poured warm milk into the bottle, fitted the nipple over the top, and handed it to Fern. Give him his breakfast, she said. A minute later, Fern was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen with her infant between her knees, teaching it to suck from the bottle. The pig, although tiny, had a good appetite and caught on quickly. The school bus honked from the road. Run, commanded Mrs. Arabelle, taking the pig from Fern and slipping a donut into her hand. Avery grabbed his gun and another donut. The children ran out to the road and climbed into the bus. Fern took no notice of the others in the bus. She just sat and stared out the window, thinking what a blissful world it was and how lucky she was to have the entire charge of a pig. By the time the bus reached school, Fern had named her pet, selecting the most beautiful name she could think of. Its name is Wilbur, she whispered to herself. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, Fern, what is the capital of Pennsylvania? Wilbur, replied Fern dreamily. The pupils giggled. Fern blushed. Chapter 2. Wilbur. All right. Fern loved Wilbur more than anything. She loved to stroke him, to feed him, to put him to bed. Every morning, as soon as she got up, she warmed his milk, tied his bib on, and held the bottle for him. Every afternoon, when the school bus stopped in front of the house, she jumped out and ran to the kitchen to fix another bottle for him. She fed him again at supper time and just before going to bed. Mrs. Arabelle gave him a feeding around noontime each day. When Fern was away at school, Wilbur loved his milk, and he was never happier than when Fern was warming up the bottle for him. He would stand and gaze up at her with adoring eyes. For the first few days of his life, Wilbur was allowed to live in a box near the stove in the kitchen. Then, when Mrs. Arabelle complained, he was moved to a bigger box in the woodshed. At 2 weeks of age, he was moved outdoors. It was apple blossom time. The days were getting warmer. Mrs. Arabelle fixed a small yard especially for Wilbur under an apple tree. I gave him a large wooden box full of straw with a doorway cut in it so he can walk in and out as he pleased. Wouldn't he be cold at night? Asked Fern. No, said her father. You watch and see what he does. Carrying a bottle of milk, Fern sat down under the apple tree inside the yard. Wilbur ran to her, and she held the bottle for him while he sucked. When he had finished the last drop, he grunted and walked sleepily into the box. Fern peered through the door. Wilbur was poking the straw with his snout. In a short time, he had dug a tunnel in the straw. He crawled into the tunnel and disappeared from sight, completely covered with straw. Fern was enchanted. It relieved her mind to know that her baby would sleep covered up and would stay warm. Every morning after breakfast, Wilbur walked out to the road with Fern and waited with her till the bus came. She would wave goodbye to him, and he would stand and watch the bus until it vanished around a turn. While Fern was in school, Wilbur was shut up inside his yard. But as soon as she got home in the afternoon, she would take him out and he would follow her around the place. If she went into the house, Wilbur went too. If she went upstairs, Wilbur would sit at the bottom step until she came down again. If she took her doll for a walk in the doll carriage, Wilbur followed along. Sometimes on these journeys, Wilbur would get tired, and Fern would pick him up and put him in the carriage alongside the doll. He liked this, and if he was very tired, he would close his eyes and go to sleep under the doll's blanket. He looked cute when his eyes were closed because his lashes were so long. The doll would close her eyes too, and Fern would wheel the carriage very slowly and smoothly so as not to wake the infants. One warm afternoon, Fern and Avery put on bathing suits and went down the brook for a swim. Wilbur tagged along at Fern's heels. When she waded into the brook, Wilbur waded in with her. He found the water quite cold, too cold for his liking. So while the children swam and played and splashed water at each other, Wilbur amused himself in the mud along the edge of a brook. Well, it was warm and moist and delightfully sticky and oozy. Every day was a happy day, and every night was peaceful. Wilbur was what farmers call a spring pig, which simply means he was born in the springtime. When he was 5 weeks old, and just to let you know, Canby has joined me. When he was 5 weeks old, Mr. Arabelle said he was now big enough to sell and would have to be sold. Fern broke down and wept, but her father was firm about it. Wilbur's appetite had increased. He was beginning to eat scraps of food in addition to milk. Mr. Arabelle was not willing to provide for him any longer. He had already sold Wilbur's 10 brothers and sisters. He's got to go, Fern, he said. You've had your fun raising a baby pig, but Wilbur's not a baby any longer, and he has got to be sold. Of Call up the Zuckerman, suggested Mrs. Arabelle to Fern. Your Uncle Homer sometimes raises a pig, and if Wilbur goes there to live, you can walk down the road and visit him as often as you would like. How much money should I ask for him? Fern wanted to know. Well, said her father, he's a runt. Tell your Uncle Homer you got a pig you'll sell for $6. See what he says. It was soon arranged. Fern phoned and got her Aunt Edith, and her Aunt Edith hollered for Uncle Homer, and Uncle Homer came in from the barn and talked to Fern. When he heard that the price was only $6, he said he would buy the pig. Next day, Wilbur was taken from his home under the apple tree and went to live in a manure pile in the center of Zuckerman's barn. All right. I'm going to read probably one more chapter, and that'll probably be it for the night. This is actually a huge chapter, the next one, but I think that's okay. So probably one more chapter, and then that'll be it for the night, and we can continue this next week. So, chapter 3 is Escape. The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay, and it smelled of manure. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could happen ever again in the world. It smelled of grain and of harness dressing and of axle grease and of rubber boots and of new rope. And whenever the cat was given a fish head to eat, the barn would smell of fish. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there were always hay in the great loft overhead. And there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses and the sheep. The barn was pleasantly warm in winter when the animals spent most of their time indoors. And it was pleasantly cool in the summer when the big doors stood wide open in the breeze. The barn had stalls on the main floor for the workhorses, tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, a sheepfold down below for the sheep, a pig pen down below for Wilbur, and it was full of all sorts of things where you can find in barns. Ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, skids, lawnmowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty green snacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build their nests in. It was the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman. Wilbur's new home was in the lower part of the barn, directly underneath the cows. Mr. Zuckerman knew that a manure pile is a good place to keep a young pig. Pigs need warmth, and it was warm and comfortable down there in the barn cellar on the south side. Fern came almost every day to visit him. She found an old milking stool that had been discarded, and she placed the stool in the sheepfold next to Wilbur's pen. Here she would quietly, during the long afternoons, thinking and listening. She sat quietly long and watching Wilbur. The sheep soon got to know her and trust her. So did the geese who lived with the sheep. All the animals trusted her. She was so quiet and friendly. Mr. Zuckerman did not allow her to take Wilbur out, and he did not allow her to get into the pig pen. Hiya, Power, how are you? But he told Fern that she could sit on the stool and watch Wilbur as long as she wanted to. It made her happy just to be near the pig. And it made Wilbur happy to know that she was sitting there right outside his pen. But he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims. One afternoon in June, when Wilbur was almost 2 months old, he wandered into the small yard outside the barn. Fern had not arrived for her usual visit. Wilbur stood in the sun, feeling lonely and bored. There's never anything to do around here, he thought. He walked slowly to his food trowel and sniffed to see if anything had been overlooked at lunch. He found a small strip of potato skin and ate it. His back itched, so he leaned against the fence and rubbed against the boards. Hi, Asha. When he tired of this, he walked indoors, climbed to the top of the manure pile, and sat down. He didn't feel like going to sleep. He didn't feel like digging. He was tired of standing still, tired of laying down. I am less than 2 months old and I'm tired of living, he said. He walked out to the yard again. When I'm out here, he says, there's no place to go but in. When I'm indoors, there's no place to go but out. That's where you're wrong, my friend, said a voice. Wilbur looked through the fence and saw the goose standing there. You don't have to stay in that dirty little yard, said the goose, who talked rather fast. One of the boards is loose. Push on it. Push on it. And come on out. What? Said Wilbur. Say it slower. At the risk of repeating myself, said the goose, I suggest that you come on out. It's a wonderful out here. Did you say that a board was loose? That I did, said the goose. Wilbur walked up to the fence and saw that the goose was right. One board was loose. He put his head down, shut his eyes, and pushed. The board gave way. In a minute, he had squeaked through the fence and was standing in the long grass outside his yard. The goose chuckled. How does it feel to be free? She asked. I like it, said Wilbur. That is, I guess I like it. Actually, Wilbur felt queer to be outside his fence, with nothing between him and the big world. Where do you think I'd better go? Anywhere you like. Anywhere you like, said the goose. Go down through the orchard, root up the sod. Go down through the garden, dig up the radishes, root up anything. Eat grass, look for corn. Thank you. Look for oats, run all over, skip and dance, jump and prance. Go down through the orchard and stroll in the woods. The world is a wonderful place when you're young. I can see that, replied Wilbur. He gave a jump in the air, twirled, ran a few steps, stopped, looked all around, and sniffed the smells of the afternoon, and then sat off, walking down through the orchard. Pausing in the shade of an apple tree, he put his strong snout onto the ground and began pushing, digging, and rooting. He felt very happy. He had plowed up quite a piece of ground before anyone noticed him. Mrs. Zuckerman was the first to see him. She saw him in the kitchen window, and she immediately shouted for the men. Homer, she cried. Pigs out, Lurvy! Pigs out, Homer! Lurvy, pigs out! He's down there under the apple tree. Now the trouble starts, thought Wilbur. Now I'll catch it. The goose heard the racket when she too started hollering. Run downhill, make for the woods, she shouted to Wilbur. They'll never catch you in the woods. The Cocker Spaniel heard the commotion, and he ran out from the barn to join the chase. Mr. Zuckerman heard, and he came out of the machine shed where he was mending a tool. Lurvy, the hired man, heard the noise and came up from the asparagus patch where he was pulling weeds. Everybody walked toward Wilbur, and Wilbur didn't know what to do. The woods seemed a long way off. And anyway, he had never been down there in the woods. He wasn't sure he would like it. Get behind him, Lurvy, said Mr. Zuckerman, and drive him towards the barn. And take it easy. Don't rush him. I'll go and get a bucket of slops. Hi. Are you coming up? Oh, yeah, I think you're coming up. We might have a little nugget coming up here. The news of Wilbur's escape spread rapidly among the animals of the place. Whatever any creature broke loose on the Zuckerman farm, the event was of great interest to the others. The goose shouted to the nearest cow that Wilbur was free, and soon all the cows knew. Then one of the cows told one of the sheep, and then all of the sheep knew. The lambs learned about it from their mothers. The horses in their stalls in the barn pricked up their ears when they heard the goose hollering. Whoa! I don't know if you can see this. Do you see I have a friend who's rubbing his face on me? I don't, you can probably see the tail, but I don't know if you can see the rest. There we go. See that? He is purring in my ear. Do you like this? Do you like this nugget? Huh? Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh man. Look at this. He's purring. He's happy. Oh, it's a little nugget. All right. Wilbur's out, they said. Every animal stirred and lifted its head and became excited to know that one of his friends had gotten free and was no longer penned up or tied fast. Wilbur didn't know what to do or which way to run. It seemed as though everybody was after him. If this is what it's like to be free, he thought, I believe I'd rather be penned up in my own yard. The Cocker Spaniel was sneaking up on him from one side. Lurvy, the hired man, was sneaking up to him from the other side. Mrs. Zuckerman stood ready to head him off if he started for the garden, and now Mr. Zuckerman was coming down towards him carrying a pail. This is really awful, thought Wilbur. Why doesn't Fern come? He began to cry. The goose took command and began to give orders. Don't just stand there, Wilbur. Dodge about, cried the goose. Skip around, run toward me, slip in and out, in and out, in and out. Make for the woods, twist and turn. The Cocker Spaniel sprang for Wilbur's hind leg. Wilbur jumped and ran. Lurvy reached out and grabbed. Mrs. Zuckerman screamed at Lurvy. The goose cheered for Wilbur. Look at this cat. Wilbur dodged between Lurvy's legs. Lurvy missed. Lurvy missed Wilbur and grabbed the spaniel instead. Nicely done, cried the goose. Try it again. Run downhill, suggested the cows. Run toward me, yelled the gander. Run uphill, cried the sheep. Turn and twist, honked the goose. Jump and dance, said the rooster. I'm going to see if I can come over a little bit so you can see this little rascal. Look out for Lurvy, called the cows. Look out for Zuckerman, yelled the gander. Watch out for the dog, cried the sheep. Listen to me, screamed the goose. Poor Wilbur was dazed and frightened by all this hullabaloo. He didn't like being the center of all this fuss. Oh, man. Look at this. Oh, God. Look at this. All right. He didn't like being the center of all this fuss. He tried to follow the instructions his friends were giving him, but he couldn't run downhill and uphill at the same time. And he couldn't turn and twist when he was jumping and dancing, and he was crying so hard he could barely see anything that was happening. After all, Wilbur was a very young pig. Not much more than a baby, really. He wished Fern was there to take him in her arms and comfort him. When he looked up and saw Mr. Zuckerman standing quite close to him, holding a pail of warm slops, he felt relieved. He lifted his nose and sniffed. The smell was delicious. Warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, Kellogg's cornflakes, and a popover left from the Zuckerman's breakfast. Come, pig, said Mr. Zuckerman, tapping the pail. Come, pig. Wilbur took a step toward the pail. No, said the goose. It's the old pail trick, Wilbur. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. He's trying to lure you back into captivity, Ibity. He's appealing to your stomach. Wilbur didn't care. The food smelled appetizing. He took another step toward the pail. Pig, pig, said Mr. Zuckerman in a kind voice, began walking slowly toward the barnyard, looking all about him innocently, as if he didn't know that a little white pig was following along behind him. You'll be sorry, 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 called the goose. Wilbur didn't care. He kept walking around the pail of slops. You'll miss your freedom, honked the goose. An hour of freedom is worth a bard of slop. Wilbur didn't care. When Mr. Zuckerman reached the pig pen, he climbed over the fence and poured the slops into the trough. Then he pulled the loose board away from the fence so that there was a wide hole for Wilbur to walk through. Reconsider, reconsider, cried the goose. Wilbur paid no attention. You're a little flying Walende here. Wilbur paid no attention. He stepped through the fence into his yard. He walked to the trough and took a long drink of slop, sucking in the milk hungrily and chewing the pop over. It was good to be home again. While Wilbur ate, Lurvy fetched a hammer and some 8-penny nails and nailed the board in place. Then he and Mr. Zuckerman leaned lazily on the fence, and Mr. Zuckerman scratched Wilbur's back with a stick. He's quite a pig, said Lurvy. Thank you, Aunt Power. This is the Save a Fox rescue that I've read about before. Yes, he'll make a good pig, said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur heard the words of praise. He felt the warm milk inside his stomach. He felt the pleasant rubbing of the stick along his itchy back. He felt peaceful and happy and sleepy. This had been a tiring afternoon. It was still only about 4 o'clock, but Wilbur was ready for bed. I'm really too young to go out into the world alone, he thought as he lay down. So I think we're going to end tonight right there, and we will pick up. And my thinking is that I'll probably read like a few pages of Charlotte's Web each day until we get it finished. It's a long book. It's not your typical children's book where you can read it in 5, 10, 15 minutes. So I will finish that, or I will continue reading that next week. Nugget has now gone back into his. Are you looking at me? Are you looking at me? Did you like your little adventure, Nugget? We got Kiara. I believe that's C Dot. C Dot and Kiara. Oh, you're welcome, DeWitty. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Ms. M. Thank you, Kitty. Oh, I enjoy doing it. I actually took a teeny weeny little nap this afternoon so that I could get in and, thank you, Pooh Bears. Thank you, Tina. Gallant wasn't happy of me leaving, so he'll be happy when I get back home. He just wanted to snuggle all day. Oh, I've been okay, Ms. M. I been finally working on the memorial plans, so finally got that down. I don't have all the things, but we have a date for Bonnie's memorial, and now I'm thinking, trying to find a dinner place, and I think we're going to do like an Irish wake, not when I say Irish wake, we'll probably just go to a luncheon at like an Irish bar restaurant in Philadelphia. So um, that's kind of what my plans are right now. So let me put this little Hershey's, and that'll be my little book cover. All right, so let me. Thank you. But we got Canvy up here. All right, everybody, I'm going to get running. Thanks for a great story time. We'll be back here next Wednesday. Hello, Coralie. Hi, Coralie. The queen of Blinky. How's the Coralie girl? How's that Coralie? You good girl?